In this video, I'm going to fix this hole in the drywall from the doorknob. Honestly, I think this hole's been here since I bought the house because there's no doorstop down on the trim. I'm going to do this one differently. This time I'm going to use a hole saw, and I'm going to cut the circle larger, and then I'm going to go and take a piece of drywall and I'm going to cut a patch with the hole saw. First thing I'm going to do with the hole saw is just remove the drill bit center so that it's just the hole saw. And one thing I would say about this is it is pretty difficult. It does try and move around a little bit. It's not that big of a deal if it jumps around about a half a centimeter in any direction. It'll still cut a nice clean hole in the end, but it is difficult actually. If you had just a regular utility knife, it might actually be easier just to put the hole saw against the wall and make a circle around it. But ultimately, despite it being a little bit difficult and sort of grab on the drywall, it does cut a nice clean hole. And then I'm going to cut a hole out of a piece of drywall that's in my basement. I cut the first hole going from the face in, and that made a bit of a mess on the face side. So I did a second one and I cut it from the back of the drywall forward, and that made a nice clean circle. Now, before I put in this circle that I just cut out with the hole saw, I'm going to put in two small pieces of wood back in behind the drywall that is currently existing. I'm going to put some screws in there, and those are going to be there to hold the circle that I cut out in place so that it'll have something to screw into. Now, I'm using just things that I have around the house. I'm not spending any money on this, but unfortunately the wood that I'm screwing into is actually maple. So I had a couple little scrap pieces of maple left over, and it's a pretty hard wood, not the hardest out there, but it is a little bit more difficult to screw into. So if you had something like pine, that would be better. If you just got scrap wood like I do, I would say just use whatever. It's not that important, but if you got something like oak or maple, it is going to be hard to screw into, and these drywall screws are not really designed to bite into a harder, higher density wood. So anyway, I'm going to put one on the far left side, and I am going to put one on the right side. You can see that there's a 2x4 stud on the right side as well, but for whatever reason that 2x4 is pretty set back. So if I put the patch in, it would actually be on a funny angle. So that's what I'm starting with here. And before I do anything, I'm just going to take some mud and I'm going to fill in where that 2x4 is. Like I said, it's too far back, so I just want to bring it level with the two pieces of maple that I put in there. And once that mud dries out, it'll obviously prevent any movement in this patch that I'm putting in. Now, I'm not going to do any California patch or flaps or anything like that. I'm not even going to tape this thing. I'm just going to straight up mud it. And before I do the mudding to patch this up properly, I am going to put, in this case, 3 screws into my patch. And I am just going to use the drywall compound or mud. And that's it. I'm not going to do anything else. So I think this thing is solid enough. It's not going to move around, and we'll see. I do put a doorstop down as well, so the doorknob isn't going to come into contact with this patch. So we'll see if this crack shows through. I don't think it will. I think that this will be just fine as it is without putting down tape or mesh or anything like that, but we'll see. I'll report back on this, but I think this one's going to turn out just fine. So anyway, the hole saw does do a good clean cut, I think, overall. However, it is fairly difficult to do the cut just because the hole saw grabs at the drywall so much. So it is a bit of a pain. I think I would stick to squares in doing this and probably stick with a California patch style, but this does seem to work fairly well. Now, as far as patching and mudding go, I do the one coat and then obviously let it dry, sand it down, and then I do a second coat, this time coming across it with a larger putty knife and covering a larger area, and then I let that dry, sand it down, and I do that one more time with a slightly larger putty knife and just going wider and wider so I can blend in the patch with the rest of the wall. For the last sanding, I do use the shop vac with the pole sander, and that just prevents getting a whole bunch of dust in the room and around the house. And for paint, I'm using Benjamin Moore Regal Select, and the color is Classic Gray, and just like that, camera can't really focus on the blank wall, but I think it turned out well. I don't know that I would do it again. Like I said, I think I'd stick to squares and California patch, but this worked. I like it. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.